web of weird connects us all. The world's a strange place, but we're all one big family. You ready to get weird? Hello and welcome back to the Web of Weird. I'm Tall Paul.
And I'm Little J. How's it going, big brother?
Doing pretty good.
Nice.
It's been a crazy week, but yeah, definitely looking forward to the show tonight and been doing a lot of research for it, so kind of excited.
Yeah, I got lots of, ideas tumbling around in the brain that I want to nerd out about, so no better person to do it with than you, big brother.
Yeah.
It's been a while, though, since we've gotten to sit down, so it feels good to, connect. Lots has been going on. Anything
Definitely.
weird happen? Anything weird happen in your world?
I had something kind of cool that I could share that happened a week ago. I was kind of feeling really not so good that evening and was just trying to do like a meditation. And I was like, I wonder if I meditated on the highest possible expression of myself, like what it would feel like being the highest possible expression of myself. And so I started doing that, and I was kind of tired, so it was pretty easy for me to like zone in on that and meditate on that idea. And all of a sudden, I could feel like this presence, and it was weird because it felt like me, but it was slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind's eye, it looked like it was pink, which was super weird.
Because that's your favorite color?
Yeah, because that's my favorite color that I wear all the time. Uh,
I know. I send you pink socks for Christmas every year.
I know black is the new pink. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
anyway, so this being came into my body, and all of a sudden, everywhere that I was storing like negative emotions and somatically, it kind of just just washed away, it went away, and I was just feeling like myself, feeling whole. That was the thing about it. It was like I felt like I had been missing pieces all my life or something, and all of a sudden I felt whole. And it was a really nice feeling after
Oh.
having a really hard day of like reconnecting with myself in a different kind of way. I'm still thinking about that one because that was strange. Like, where did I even come up with that idea? Number one, because it just kind of came out of nowhere. Number two, like sometimes people talk about their higher selves, like what like it just makes me wonder about like what's the higher self, or like in magic they call it like the knowledge and conversation with the holy guardian angel.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that is, or I don't know, whatever it was really spontaneous, and I felt like I connected with a part of myself that I had been needing to, and I felt really good, and I fell asleep pretty quickly after, so that was
Nice.
great. Yeah. So that was my cool weird experience
That's a very
since I
cool.
talked to you
That's
last.
a very cool weird experience. Yeah. I had a super funny dream a couple nights ago that I think you'll appreciate because you know the people that were in the dream and you know their personality. So I dreamt that Tigger died suddenly and it was sad, and I was sitting with his husband, and like I think we were like his husband was upset and I was consoling him, maybe, I don't know, I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden Tigger walks in the room and he sits down, and I'm like looking at him and he's looking at me, and he starts talking to me. He's like, you need to tell Lucas this, blah 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 blah. And he's like starting to rattle stuff off to me, and I look at him, I'm like, I can actually see you. And he goes, duh, bitch, that's why I came and haunted your ass. God, like, why do you think I'm here? I need you to tell Lucas some shit. Now shut up and listen. And I was like, oh, okay. And he started telling me about like where he had left some things and some chores that he had wanted Lucas to do. And I was like, okay. And it was really funny. It was just like I don't know. It was just this funny thing. I was like, I can actually see him. He's like, yeah, duh, bitch. Like, why? It was great.
Yeah, that sounds like exactly something he would say too.
Totally. Totally. So that I like woke up kind of laughing and I was like, "Oh, it was sad that he died in my dream, but that was really actually something I could see that person doing to me." Like exactly. That is like a post-mortem conversation that I would have with that man. So, that was great.
Tell my husband to clean the fridge.
Yeah, yeah. It was stuff like that. Like, oh, I left my this and that here and make sure to, yeah, make sure to clean the cat box. And I don't know. It made me giggle. I was like, of course, you're going to haunt me. And then you're going to like give me a list of like honeydews for your husband. Like, okay, great. It was very good. It was very good. Duh, bitch. Okay. Anyways, so not so much weird, but kind of funny. My dreams crack me up sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've been
Hmm.
seeing any numbers or anything like that at all this week or last week?
No, but oh, you know how sometimes synchronicities are just so random. Maybe this isn't even really interesting, but my neighbor's got a new puppy dog, and this dog looks just like my business partner's dog, Cleo, right? And I was standing
Yeah.
out in front of his driveway, and he's the high school art teacher here, right? He's the high school teacher. And
Okay.
some high school kids live in the house across the street. And as I'm talking to him about his new dog, and I'm like, "Oh, your new dog looks just like my business partner's dog." And I say the name Cleo, and like just as I said the name Cleo, he turns down the driveway and he goes, "Hi, Cleo," because the girl driving the car and dropping off the neighbor girl, his name is Cleo, right? And so we
Whoa.
practically said Cleo like in like Jinx, like it's like, "Oh, this dog just makes, this dog looks like Cleo." And as I'm saying this dog looks like Cleo, he's like, "Hey, Cleo," to this girl driving the car. And then she's like, "Hey, Mr. So and so," which is really cute because they call him Mr. So and so because he's their teacher. Anyways, and then she drops off
Right.
the neighbor girl and drives away. And I was like, that was weird. And he's like, what just happened? And I was like, I was saying the name Cleo and you said, I don't know. It was just one of those, when the universe just collides. Maybe it's just coincidence. It's meaningless. But, it's like those little pings, like, that name was
Yeah.
resonating around and it was coming out of everyone's mouth at once. And I mean, it doesn't mean anything, but it's just one of those moments where me and my neighbor were like, that was odd. Didn't mean anything, but that was odd. Yeah, it was definitely like a moment. And you wonder, like, what resonant ripples were cruising out there when I was thinking about another dog. And then this person shows up with the same name and whatever. So I don't know. But, again, I just have to say that, like, I guess that's the humor of the universe, it's like just meaningless, but it's still funny. And my neighbor and I both noticed it. We were like, oh, weird. Okay. We're moving on.
If nothing else, so it was a good laugh, right?
It
Yeah.
was a good, yeah, it makes you feel like the abyss is yelling back, right? You look into the abyss and the abyss looks back kind of deal.
And says Cleo.
And says, Cleo. I miss that dog. She's such a cute dog. And my neighbor's dog is so cute. Such a cute little pup. It's a little pity McNabb mix or whatever. He's a cute, good little boy though. And Otter loves him, so that's great. Otter's got a new best friend.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. That's all I got for weird right now. So what are we talking about today? Power of place? Yeah?
Yeah. Hmm.
What do
Yeah, you
you
got it. You got it.
what do you think about when, talk people who talk a lot about folklore and mythology and magical happenings. They talk about the power of place. Like, I don't know, like what does that even mean to you? Like, what does it mean? What do you think about that?
Yeah, they're all linked together, the folklore, magical happenings, legends, all that stuff with
Mm-hmm.
these places. And these places are usually places that could be like dealing with mountains. A lot of times they're dealing with mountains, caves, or expansive forests or something like
Or
that, like
expanses of
something,
water.
or expanses of water, things like
Mm-hmm.
that, or desert. Like it can be any kind of land really.
Yeah, our landscape
But
seems to always play into it, right? Like the landscape is always seems to be part of the story.
yeah, I think so too. And I kind of feel like it's like relational. People are relating to the land that's around them.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually thinking about that a lot when researching this because we're kind of super high tech now and kind of cut off from that and understanding kind of the relationships of everything and how it happens just outdoors, outside around us, because we were around that all the time. And so you become, when you live like that, you are also in tune with things that are a lot more subtle. And I think that some of these places are tuned into some kind of subtle, invisible energy, electromagnetic energy that's happening in a lot of these sacred spots, things that'll like make compasses go crazy or like make your tri-field meter go nuts. Like they're all invisible forces. And I think that our ancestors kind of understood this a lot more. We're probably able to tune into it and use it. Also, these places, I think the magnetic properties in a lot of these areas are probably really good for healing your body. And I think that we had wisdom with that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, using it to commune with other dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
So, like portal type stuff. That's what I've always been interested in, and trying to look for more information about the portal and like vortex stuff, places where the magnetic fields are weak or too strong,
Mm-hmm.
all those things. But yeah, I think there are just places for people to relate to the invisible forces that are inherent there and probably to commune with beings in other dimensions. That's my take on it.
I have been sort of stewing over this. We've been talking a lot about power of place and people's experiences inside of landscapes, inside of environments. And
Mhm.
not to reduce this down into like science, because I'm this by no means is like a forte in my science knowledge or anything, but when I think about all of the sort of magical happenings or folkloric happenings or mythologies, I don't know. I think the power of place is about a relationship between frequency, electricity, and magnetism, and how that affects like our lived experience and what our brains can
Mhm.
be, sort of perceiving in any given moment. I mean, our neural network is just a sack of electricity firing off all the time. Um,
Exactly. Mhm.
so, yeah. And so, you know, I'm a nerd about geology and soil, and geology and the mineralogy of soil are like how that geology, how those rocks break down into soil over time, and like all the little minerals that are a part of that soil. It's like,
Mhm.
when I was just sitting in this sort of thinking about it, and I just thought, man, how does a place's physical structure affect us, and how vast, like there's this infinite sort of like shifting cocktail of mineralogy and biology and
Yep.
abiotic factors, like abiotic stuff meaning like temperature and elevation and all those like non-living forces that are exerting themselves upon the environment. And
Yep.
every single place has this like shifting cocktail of how all these different things, all the confluences of all those different things. And like how
Sure.
does that exert its influence on our lived experience? And it can go so simply as, we're in a cold environment and we're cold, all the way down to what is the deal with limestone and the like high strangeness, all the murmurings out there in the woo community about how limestone, something about limestone and high strangeness. Hats off to the Pennyroyal folks who have done some like amazing storytelling and information gathering around that stuff. And
Sure.
I've thought
Yep.
about this for years, like how flowing water or different plant communities or different even like microbiology could be affecting our experiences. And as I was like thinking about that, I sort of went down a rabbit hole, and I just found out some really I learned a lot of interesting things when I started to look at how, again, just going back to the relationship between frequency, electricity, and magnetism, and how all these different environments have different variables, and all these different geological elements and soil elements have all these different like materials. I wonder, how does that all hang together? How are we influenced by that? How does that change our magnetic fields? How do we engage with that?
Yeah.
We know through physics and science, like electricity and magnetism are really two aspects of the same thing. And frequency comes from that, right? Frequency is just a description of how energy is registering out in the universe, right? From all this electricity and magnetism. And we know like a changing electric field creates a magnetic field, and a changing magnetic field will create an electric field. It just trips me out how like interlaced those ideas are. And then I also wonder, like, for all the atheist, hardcore, materialistic science people, the issue science has is, the vastness of the combination creates an inability to really control that complexity in a way that
Yeah.
creates measurable variables where we can have something that's significant relative to something else. You can't hold nature constant so you can compare other nature to it. Like that doesn't really work because the environments are so complex. Like
Right.
science really isn't able to reduce and dissect to understand all the bits and pieces. And if it was able to do that, well, then you have to leave the whole the orchestrated whole of it is left in obscurity when you dissect it and reduce it and try to control and compare relative to something else, right? So I'm
Yeah.
like, the very nature of the scientific process or the scientific method loses the vastness, and it'll just be lost in obscurity because we can't quantify that in a clear, concise way, right? So for me, I feel like having a science background or whatever, I'm like, let's leave room for the mystery because there's no way science has the tools yet, and maybe might never, and maybe it's not about having the tools to define it. I don't know. I've gone around about this in my brain, but I just think it's all so vast and complex. Like, there's no way you can get the scientific method around that in a way that's going to explain life, the universe, and everything, I guess. So,
Right.
you know,
Just the way it is, the way it stands. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And there's like also a part of me that's like, likes that. I like the mystery. Like getting a science degree, I'm like, shit, am I gonna be one of those like hardcore atheist? Am I gonna lose my love for the mystery? And I'm like, no, man, science just butts up against where the mystery is and defines it maybe even more, you know? And I think a lot of science based thinkers are atheists or materialism kind of thinking makes people ignore the mystery and just say, this is what we know, the end. I'm like, okay, but we've always known only what we know and there's always more to know. So why is that lost upon you in skepticism and stuff? So, yeah. Anyways, power of place. Sorry, I kind of went on a rant there, but like the science part of it is really interesting to me. And when I look at science,
Sure is.
I see all this stuff reflected through it, and I'm just like, why do people not enjoy the mystery or not embrace the mystery?
I think a lot of scientists don't get into like investigating it very much because they're probably worried about their standing, you
Oh
know.
yeah. I mean, that's
Um,
huge. One, where's the money? Because you're always trying to get money for research, and then that's what gets researched, right? And then two, yeah,
yeah,
if you go outside the guardrails of that atheist materialism kind of way of looking at science, then you're sort of branded as another, right? You know?
yeah, and there are some scientists I think that have actually done that, like taken the plunge and like taken their lumps from that. I've
Oh
heard
yeah.
of a handful, not very many, but
Well,
um,
one that came up is when we were talking about this, and sort of somebody I felt like I wanted to bring into our conversation about this is like, you know, Michael Persinger and Stanley Coren, the dudes that invented the God helmet, which was like that magnetic
yeah,
stimulation that they were applying to the brain and supposedly creating, you know, mystical and spiritual experiences for people. And they were definitely, that was not accepted in the scientific community, you know.
yeah.
Their results were debunked, their results were repeated, there was a mixed bag, but overall it was damaging to their reputations for sure.
To me, that's so great that he stepped out and did that because looking for some kind of data to figure out how if it's possible that magnetics can affect your brain and your consciousness and stuff like that. Obviously he did, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah, that God helmet thing. Greg and Dana Newkirk, I think both did it and both swore by it up and down that it changed their consciousness for sure. So
And
I
that's
I don't
they
know. I
were
believe that.
using a magnetic, they were using a frequency of a certain hertz applied. It was a very low hertz frequency. It wasn't very
Sure.
extreme at all. You know, so they were changing the magnetic field of the brain, they were changing the electric signature of the brain during all of that, you know? So, but then that goes back to that relationship between, you know, frequency, electricity, and magnetism. That's the like the trifecta that's kind of swirling around us, you know? There's so many things that we know exist that are not on a visual spectrum for us, right? Like we know infrared,
Right.
we know the visual light frequencies is just like one little sliver of the whole light spectrum. And like these are things we know. We know we've proven mathematically that, you know, other dimensions exist. That's a
Yeah.
mathematically proven theory, even though we can't visually perceive it or our brains can't seem to perceive it in this linear space we're in.
Yeah.
So, you know, I find all that stuff fascinating. I'm like, you know, there's a lot of science that's there that I feel like reflects some of this mystical shit. Yeah. I found out some cool stuff about geology and mineralogy when I was doing some research. And then
Nice.
just for shits and giggles, I decided to geolocate the Patterson Gimlin film site and look it up on a geological map to see what was going on out there.
Ooh, nice. Okay.
You like
That's
that?
that's an interesting call. Okay, cool.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
just got a hair up my nerdy butt and I was like, let's look at geology of something where something strange has happened. And then, of course, Bluff Creek is just a hop, skip, and a jump away from me. So I was like, let's go zoom over there and then the coordinates for it are like online or whatever. So I grabbed the coordinates and I popped it into the USGS geological map and I cruised over there to see what was going on with the geology. And I was like, that's very interesting. And so I'll share that with you at some point tonight if you want.
Nice.
Yeah, I know. I went for it.
Nice.
I was like, I think Paul will think this is funny.
Yeah. So we've both been really stuck on this idea of the geology too, and like
Yeah.
how that affects everything.
I
But
mean, we've
also
talked
like,
about this for years. And then
yeah,
I know recently it's been, not recently, but I mean, people talk. I wasn't surprised when that Pennyroyal podcast came out and they were talking a lot about the limestone that's happening over there in Kentucky. And yeah. And
yeah,
when,
they've got near
yeah,
Somerset, I think it is, right?
yeah, the magnetic
Um,
anomaly.
uh-huh,
Uh
the
huh.
magnetic anomaly over there. So they got meteorites in the soil everywhere. They've got iron in the soil because those are iron mines,
Quartz.
aren't they? Yeah, quartzite, limestone,
Mm hmm.
and there's meteorite everywhere.
Mm hmm.
There's been multitude of meteorite strikes there because there was like one big one that seems to like be
Mm hmm.
drawing down more stuff
Yeah.
in that area. So that whole area is charged, and then they have
Uh
that
huh.
giant, like huge quartz bed or whatever it is that's underneath the whole
Mm hmm.
Pulaski County or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's like multiple things.
Yeah. One of the things that I learned when I was looking at the magnetic properties of limestone, when I was looking at research around that, I found a paper from probably about like 10 years ago. And it really caught my eye because they were talking about biogenic magnetite. And, magnetite is like sort of natural. That's what like lodestone is. Lodestone, yeah? Like that's what the
Yeah,
naturally magnetic rocks are made out of. I don't know what magnetic mineralogy is in meteorites, but I would be curious to see if it's some sort of iron oxide, and the ones that are magnetic are iron oxide 2 and 3 or whatever. Sorry, nerd detail. It doesn't really matter, but
yeah,
limestone comes from like marine sedimentation, right? So like marine organisms that die and sort of accumulate on the ocean's basins, and then over time they metamorphosize and through pressure and all kinds of stuff happens, right? And then they're uplifted, or places that were once covered with water aren't covered with water anymore, like in the case of Kentucky. What I found out was there's something called biogenic magnetite, and I was like, it really like caught my eye, and I was like, biogenic meaning it's biologically produced, right?
yeah.
And I didn't really understand this prior to this. So,
Well, you do know that magnetite is present in like the physiology of like birds for sure, and a bunch of other animals and human beings too. So I think that's really cool.
yeah, it can also come out of like volcanoes and shit too, though.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah.
So I was reading this paper on pelagic carbonates, which is like ocean basin carbonates. That's what pelagic or pelagic means, right? And
Okay.
it talks about recent advances with the recognition of widespread preservation of biogenic magnetite, which is the inorganic remains of magnetotactic bacteria. And they have fundamentally changed our understanding of the magnetic properties of pelagic carbonates. This paper reviews, I'm sort of paraphrasing here, this paper reviews for the magnetic materials typically preserved in these pelagic carbonates. And so, yeah, so I was like, magnetotactic bacteria, eh? Then that kind of sent me down another rabbit hole because there are these like prokaryotic bacteria that are basically their version of like motility, like how they move around in this world, is through the use of magnetism, and they produce this magnetite to align with the Earth's geomagnetic field, so they can move around.
What?
Yeah, dude. And like, you know what a fan I am of like fungi and bacteria. And I had never heard of magnetotactic bacteria before. I can barely say it. I sound like an idiot, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. So they're like kind of ubiquitous in these aquatic environments, meaning they're kind of everywhere and they kind of hang out. This is also really interesting to me just because of like the whole liminal shit that is around in this life. But these like magnetotactic bacteria hang out. They're called microaerophiles and anaerobes, which means they hang out in these transition zones of where the water becomes oxygenated to not oxygenated, meaning it's anaerobic, meaning no oxygen. So they're like
Okay.
microaerophiles, meaning they just need a little bit of air to survive, but they don't live in a fully aerated, oxygenated atmosphere, or they're anaerobic. So they live in this like transition zone in the water where things go from aerobic to anaerobic, right? Okay, so just like me being a nerd, I'm instantly like, whoa, these bacteria exist in like the liminal zone of
Yeah.
you know? So I thought that was totally amazing, but they have these like basically these little like organelles, these little like physiological structures that like harness through their little anaerobic cell respiration processes. They don't use oxygen to respire, so they use other things like
Okay.
sulfur and iron and all this stuff. And in doing so, they create these little like this little membrane that creates this magnetite, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, okay. All right. So follow me with this. So here we are in this marine environment with all these awesome magnetic bacteria floating around. And where does calcium carbonate come from? But it's a marine environment where all this stuff is set, like the sedimentation of all these marine organisms is like settling out. And so this whole paper was talking about how calcium carbonate has these like unique profiles of magnetism, and they're able to look at these deep ocean basin carbonates and look at like magnetic records of the Earth's like axis and what was going on with the Earth's magnetic situation over like the millions and millions of years that this like, so it's like
Wow.
stratified in this like calcium carbonate material, a record
Yeah.
of the Earth's geomagnetic activity, basically. And that's like what they
Yeah.
were studying. Okay, isn't that kind of mind blowing? And that it
Yeah,
comes
that's really cool.
generally through the sedimentation of these like these bacteria basically leaving residues of magnetite up in the calcium carbonate, right? Okay, so for me, I was just kind of like, dude, I'm so stoked that this all came back to like bacteria because I'm such a fan of microbiology because I feel like we are probably more bacteria than we actually are humans. So, what's up, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I was just thinking about how they also talked a little bit about the remagnetization of some of these layers of calcium carbonate because of environmental conditions like heat or
Sure.
something coming in an event that happened, whether it was like a blast of heat or a blast of something or other, and sort of creating a magnetic record of that. So they can look at like thermal vents affecting things in the calcium carbonate. For me, I
Sure.
think when you talk about like meteorites coming and like blasting a situation, like could calcium carbonate become remagnetized or magnetized in a way because it has that magnetite component to it. This is not, these are just musings, right? These are my musings. And I just, when you talk about like meteorites coming and hitting a place like, Somerset, I'm just like, maybe something happened there to like change or like record a magnetic frequency, or like magnetite, when it becomes magnetized, it stays a magnet, like not all paramagnetic material doesn't hold, like something like aluminum doesn't hold a magnetic charge, once the magnetic field goes away, but like
Hmm.
ferromagnetic material like irons will, right? Magnetite,
Right.
hematite, all of those things will hold a magnetic charge once the magnetic field is gone, right? So,
Yep.
anyhow, aren't magnetotactic bacteria like the coolest thing?
Well, super cool. Like when you were talking about that, it reminds me of extremophiles, but
Well,
in a different way.
extremophiles are totally in that same camp because extremophiles do not use, they can withstand, like high heat or high cold,
Yeah.
and a lot of times they are not using oxygen to complete their cellular respiration. They're using sulfur, they're using other things, nitrogen, all these like anaerobic organisms, we study them a lot in when I teach wetland soils, anaerobic respiration and what that does for like nutrient cycling and stuff. And yeah, it's interesting to me that they actually can biologically produce magnetite with these like little organelles they have called like, I can't remember what they're called, magnetosomes or some shit like that. I don't know. It's crazy. So basically, the amount of like magnetite, hematite, and this other magnetic material called greigite. So magnetite and greigite.
You're
So
good.
there's like different kinds of minerals that can be sort of biogenically made depending on what's available to that organism to use, right? And then different
Sure.
environmental factors are playing into that. Yeah, there's just this cocktail of, again, that cocktail of complexity. It's changing all over the place depending on what is happening, what kind of environmental events are happening, what kind of whatever, right?
Yep.
That trips me out a lot. I was like, I did not know bacteria did that. I've studied a lot of bacteria and a lot of things. I did not know that they made magnetite, which has made me very happy.
Yeah, that is super cool. I just recently heard that inside of some of the world's largest selenite crystals,
Mm-hmm.
they've found extremophiles that live in the water there.
Uh-huh.
Like they have like little tiny pockets that these little extremophiles live in. And the world's largest selenite crystals are in the Chihuahuan Desert.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a bunch of other craziness that happens in the area too. Like there's UFOs all over the place. There's old megalithic sites that are nearby. There's also like the mines are filled with not just selenite, but like silver and zinc, which I find really interesting too. So that's another weird little area.
Yeah, and it's like what's okay, so what's the combination if like magnetic fields can be produced, by like biology or other kinds of mineralogy, and then there's like this other geology like these metal based compounds, like you were saying the zinc or the iron or all of those can sort of hold or conduct, right? So then
Yeah,
you're looking at like, well, dang, okay, so then there's this stuff that feels like, okay, so you got bacteria synthesizing magnetic, what, like nanoparticles. It's called, they make these little magnetic nanoparticles. And then there's metals that exist from volcanic eruptions and deposition, or whatever geologic phenomenon is happening, right? So, and then you have, let's just talk also about like quartz. Let's talk about quartz and silica, right? Like, quartz are in our watches, right? How does that work? And
Yeah. Piezoelectricity and stuff like
yeah,
that.
piezo, yes, yeah, exactly. The piezoelectricity, right? Which is like why I feel like piezoelectricity is affected by magnetism, which why, some people can't wear watches because their watches stop and shit, right? It's like the
Sure.
magnetic
Yep.
field can sort of, yeah. And you can basically, by applying mechanical stress to quartz, you can create this piezoelectric effect. Like, okay, so like what's mechanical stress, right? Like mechanical stress is compression, right? Mechanical
Yep.
stress is torsional stress, which is like twisting, like if I had a stick and I like twisted it, right?
Portion. Yeah.
And then, yeah, and then there's tensile stress, which is like, think if I like had a stick and I was stretching it out from side to side, right? It was like a piece of taffy or something. That's tensile, tensile stress. And then
Yep.
there's shear stress, which is like if I had a stick and I tried to break it by pushing my hand up one way and my other hand down, right? So it's like up down shearing stress, right? So like imagine how many different mechanical stresses can exist in the natural environment just naturally. I live in the most tectonically active place in the continental United States or whatever. We have a ton of mechanical stress happening in the ground here. What's going on at other places, and then also if magnetism can also affect quartz, that's kind of a, I don't know. Yeah, that's, I think magnetic fields can affect quartz, their piezoelectricity as well. So I'm
Hmm.
like, man, you can really like have a concert of things orchestrated to be exerting influences on each other that are creating all these different, again, frequency, magnetism, and electricity, like the confluences between those things depending on what's present in any given environment could definitely, why can't that exert an influence on our brain? If the God helmet can get stuck on our head and a
Right.
very low frequency affect our brain waves, like why couldn't a landscape do that to us?
Right. Absolutely. 100%. Yeah, because we have that naturally occurring magnetite in our brain
Mm-hmm.
already. Some people have said that there are like Aboriginals in Australia that still are tuned into it and can follow magnetic ley lines,
That's
um, which
cool.
I which I think is just
That's
nuts.
rad.
Yeah, I think it's super rad. I was kind of looking at this place called Bradshaw Ranch again.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Have
I'm
you heard
familiar.
heard
I'm
of Bradshaw
familiar.
Ranch?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was kind of
Just okay.
more
Let me get this straight. Broadshaw Ranch is kind of near Skinwalker Ranch, right? It's kind of like touted as kind of another place where anomalous things are happening, like
100%.
Skinwalker
Yeah,
Ranch. Okay, okay. Just trying to. I'm just
it's
okay.
yeah, it's totally like Skinwalker. It's in Arizona. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind of right near that Four Corners strangeness area in general. So Bradshaw Ranch, there was this big case where somebody saw like a UFO, like a portal open in the sky, and a UFO come straight out of it, kind of like a window opening in the sky and a different background behind it, and this object coming through like a UFO,
Mm-hmm.
and then the portal shut. So that kind of stuff happens there,
Mm-hmm.
which to me is just wild to even think of. But it's the same lineup as any of these other places that are full of high strangeness.
I would be dying to
You get,
know what's happening in the geology and in the soils and in the plant community there. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd be very curious to know how that all hangs
Yes.
together. Like, what is that?
Yeah. So like, well, I was just gonna finish real quick. Like, yeah, it's got the same old lineup. Like people see cryptids, people see Bigfoot,
Mm-hmm.
people see UFOs. Some people go into the area and get sick and nauseous and
Mm-hmm.
need to leave.
Mm-hmm.
So I was watching this documentary. I think it's just called Bradshaw Ranch. It's on Prime or whatever. Not the best production value, but it had some, they pulled in some really interesting and awesome people into it. And they had this guy who used to be a scientist who brought his magnometer out there with
Ooh.
him
Ooh.
to start measuring stuff. And
Yeah.
that was the guy who got the juicy bits from. So he said basically what's happening here is that in Bradshaw Ranch, there's this gigantic quartz deposit that's underneath the ground,
Mm.
and you've got all this red soil with iron oxide in it over the top. And he's like, this would be perfect to be able to transmit or receive something. This is basically like a radio receiver
Mm-hmm.
kind of setup
Mm-hmm.
right here.
Mm-hmm.
And same kind of business where you'd go in there, tri-field meter, reading EMF stuff would go crazy, and then sometimes it would just totally shut off. The magnetic fields fluctuate a lot. And that's something I'm starting to see a little bit more of now when I look at some of these shows. Like, it's not like you go in there and it's like a straight number.
Mm-hmm.
It'll kind of like dip up and down.
I mean, I
And
wonder
I
if that
think,
has to do with the level of like moisture in the soil at any given time of day. I mean, it could
I
be, all kinds of different things. Temperature.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. The number of the magnetics going up and down, I thought was really interesting. But yeah, so you got big, huge bed of quartz and then all this iron oxide soil on top. And a lot of times people will go into that specific area where the energy is more concentrated and where there's an alleged portal too nearby. People just get sick and start feeling nauseous and feel like they need to leave.
Mm-hmm.
There are incidents of stuff like that, Skinwalker too,
Mm-hmm.
of people's physiology, like making them sick, or like sometimes even also like microwave injuries.
Mm-hmm.
There's some kind of weird microwave stuff that's happening there too. That's random and strange.
Fascinating. Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like some other stuff I found about like biogenic magnetism, like, biology or bacteria making magnetic nanoparticles or whatever, wasn't just in calcium carbonate, which is one kind of sedimentary, kind of material. But I also found stuff about not so much magnetite, but like hematite showing up like in sandstones and stuff, which is kind of just another flavor of a magnetic substance. Anyways, I thought that was interesting because I was like, well, if this one sedimentary geology has it, does others? I think a lot of that area is sandstone as well. So it's not just limestone, it's sandstone, it's iron oxides combined with quartz. Yeah, another really interesting thing that I found, because they're doing some research on like other polymers that they can use for piezoelectric stuff and like whatever. It's like for some technology stuff when they use silica right now, but they want to use other things, and so they were doing research into other types of material that have piezoelectric properties. And this one surprised me too. But amorphous silicate clays, okay, this is such nerdy soil science stuff, but like amorphous silicate clays are interesting because they basically come from ash. Like a lot of the amorphous silicate clays come out of like volcanic stuff. And we call it amorphous because a lot of the silicate based clays clay particles have these like structures, these little like lattice structures. And this type of amorphous particle lacks structures, hence the amorphous thing, right? So, but it comes out of like volcanoes. So, like the Andes Mountains has tons of this deposited all over the place. Anywhere where there's like a buttload of volcanic ash that got dumped down because of stuff,
Okay.
you're dealing with material that has that piezoelectric quality that quartz does. So, like, not only quartz has that, like other types of soil materials, other types of geologic materials that are being deposited have this. Like, the universe is, our world is a vast and beautiful place of like, it's not just limestone, but it's other sedimentary things. It's not just quartz, but it's these other silicate particles that exist out there that have these properties to varying degrees and to different effects. Like, this is just all these different profiles. It's this infinite thing of like, how are things layered in that place and what makes the power of place? What is the profile that is the power of a place?
Mm.
So that's really interesting to me that the iron oxides are layered over the quartz at Bradshaw Ranch, and that
Yeah.
other kinds of minerals have similar properties that are, will they produce a similar outcome? That question, I don't really know, but definitely is my musing.
So interesting. Like the volcano theme seems to be popping up a lot for me with looking at this too.
Yeah,
And most of these major sacred sites all are made out of igneous rock.
yeah, right. All that volcanic based
So,
rock. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
I stayed in a bed and breakfast in Idaho Falls. Do you remember when I stayed in this place? It was a bed and breakfast that somebody built, and they remodeled a church. And the church was
yeah,
made out of some sort of igneous material. That was so magnetic that it screwed up compasses. Like, you couldn't use a compass in
yeah,
or around it because the the stone of the building was so magnetic that it messed up the compass. And I got to thinking about that place again, and I mean, that it was weird. I definitely felt like that place was haunted. Anyways, and there was just some like, the guy that built it, I think, was a mason too, if I'm not mistaken. Anyways,
He's probably related to the Templar somehow.
yeah, and there was also like this whole like tower, sort of like where a bell tower would be, but there was no bell up in it, like at a church. And it was like behind a bookcase. So it was like this hidden entrance to this tower that you went up. And the thing was aligned with the four directions like perfectly. Like, it was built perfectly in direction, like north, south, east, west. Like, it was perfectly aligned with the direct four directions, which was also, anyways, the place had some stuff going on with it for sure. But that igneous rock that was selected to build that place, like, it was magnetically charged, like it was holding a magnetic charge. Like, how did that
Yeah,
happen?
yeah,
Not all basalt rock has a magnetic charge that it's holding like that. So, like, where the heck did
not
that
all of
come
it.
from?
You have to know that it's in there.
You have to know that it, oh, yeah, you have to know that it's in there. And did the person who built it
Yep,
know that it was in there? Did they select it for that? I don't know. Like,
right.
and then for what ends did they select it? And then how did all of that igneous rock get charged magnetically? Like, in nature, how did that happen? Electricity, lightning? Did lightning strike a lava field somewhere or something? I mean, I don't know. Or like you said, like a meteor. So,
Yeah, maybe.
so many questions.
Here's a question. Do you know if radiation can affect magnetism too?
Yeah, because that's all part of the light frequency.
That's part of the light frequency.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, totally.
Yeah, I
Like
thought it was
EMF and radiate. Yeah, they're all on a. Yes.
okay. Kind of had like a half thought about that. Like I was just thinking about like your calcium carbonate and like wondering if you could date like a coronal mass ejection or something like that
Well,
with
you know, and not only
something
could
like
radiation affect magnetism, but so does heat.
and heat. Yeah,
Heat
okay.
is a
Mm,
source of influence on that too, right? So, um,
right.
yeah, yeah. So there's just all kinds of stuff that could be happening in a certain place, especially over the course of, whatever, a millennia or whatever, right?
Yeah. That makes me think about sacred sites that have been like totally demolished or destroyed, like Puma Punku in Bolivia.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one with all like the H blocks that have been like look like they've been laser cut that still have like
Yeah,
the super sharp edges and stuff.
yeah,
There's some old scorch marks that have been seen all around there. Anyway, it makes me wonder if like somehow like these were blocks were all kind of like made magnetically like kind of locked together in a jigsaw fashion, and some big heat coronal mass ejection force just messed up the entire game plan of that entire thing and made it actually blow up.
yeah. Okay, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, like a huge blast of radiation from the
Yeah,
sun.
yeah, to mess with the ongoing baseline magnetics that were there in that
Yeah,
structure.
made the whole thing go haywire
Yeah,
or blasted it out or like, everyone's worried about like some mass coronal ejection blasting through and like destroying all of our technology, which is, you know,
possible.
kind of the same concept, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it was like if they were using some sort of network that they had designed that was based on magnetism, electricity, and frequency, and then something came through and just blasted it all to hell just from the sun or whatever, or
yeah,
a
yeah,
meteor
kind of,
or some other catastrophic event, like what would that do? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, kind of like the Carrington event where there was a CME that came down and set all the telegraph wires
What's a
on fire
CME?
in coronal mass
Oh,
ejection.
oh, okay, okay. Acronym. Got
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I'm just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Wait a second.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
great.
the Carrington event. That was the one that set all the telegraph wires
Yeah.
on fire.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. I am familiar with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's crazy. Carrington
Um,
event. Yeah. I wonder about some of like the disappearance of certain peoples too from places. Like they just seem like they disappeared. Like, I don't know. Like, what happens if they didn't disappear or die? What happens if they, like, I don't know, shifted their
yeah, you can.
frequency and literally disappeared into some other realm of existence or something, Like, I
Right.
don't know. I mean, it's possible. We are just bags of frequency and magnetism and right?
Can't have a power of place show without referring to missing 411.
Oh, oh, dude.
Yeah, and what does David Blaze always says? He says like there's usually like common themes that always happen in the cases where people just go poof. It says there's usually like what like granite nearby, running water, and lots of times change in weather.
Okay.
Yeah, like all of a sudden storm will come on out of nowhere.
Huh.
Like that just a drastic change in weather. He always says this like right by running water though. That's always a major one.
So
Yeah, so
speaking of like geology of places, do you want to find out what I found out about the Patterson Gimlin film site?
oh yeah, yeah. What'd you find out on the USGS map?
Yeah. So okay. I found out that there is a Jurassic formation there of
Sure.
shale and sandstone,
Okay.
which again goes back to that like the magnetic properties of sedimentary stones. I thought that was interesting. And then there's also minor components of chert, slate, limestone, and pyroclastic rocks, which are like volcanically deposited pyroclastic is igneous material, volcanic material,
Sure.
right? So, but there are bits of chert slate limestone. So I thought that was really interesting. And then pyroclastic rocks are fragments that are like ejected by explosive volcanic eruptions. I also think that's interesting because of what we were talking about as far as like events that produce like heat or something else in the environment where stuff might be getting charged up. And shale is sedimentary and mostly clay, pressed together kind of clay, but it is also a good percentage, like a good, 28% or whatever, quartz. So there's a huge component of clay and quartz in it, in addition to like carbonate materials like the limestone, like other kinds of carbonates, right? And then a bunch of iron oxides is in it as well. Again, you have that mixture of iron oxides and quartz, which you were just talking about with the Bradshaw Ranch, right?
Yep.
So that,
Yep. The
but
combo.
but it's like happening inside of the shale geology. It's not like a quartz vein with iron oxide soils on top. This is like all literally mushed together in the shale. Yeah.
Yeah. All these tiny little particulates mushed. Yeah.
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 Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I thought was really interesting is, and just characteristic of that place, is it like directly due east of the PNG site, there is a thrust zone because, okay, if you think about it, they're like in a creek bed. So think like Bluff Creek, it's in like a low point, right? And then we live in really super steep landscape out here. Like I said, we're super tectonically active. And so the ridges like shoot up on either side of that creek, and just due east of that Bluff Creek film site, there's a thrust zone basically. So think thrust meaning like mushed, like something, tectonic activity thrusted up a bunch of rock into a ridge east of it. And then that thrust zone is like a different geologic material, and that's mostly ultramafic rocks, which is again igneous kinds of volcanic material, and it's mostly serpentine over there. So, and that's from like a different time period. It's from the Mesozoic time period, but so it's different than the Jurassic time. So there's a different time scale there with that when that material was formed. But serpentine
Sure.
is also a really interesting material here too. So serpentine has high amounts of magnesium and nickel. Like nickel is big in serpentine, so we have like that metal. Yeah. So
Is there copper in there? Because it's like got that weird bluish green.
that's a good question. Serpentine uh, is, the soil that forms from serpentine is it has a nickname called blue goo. And serpentine soils are high in a lot of metals, and actually not far from there's a copper mine, like up in the Klamath. They've mined copper and nickel out of that area, and so copper is something that is around there for sure. That's part of the
Yeah. Yeah.
deal over there in that area.
Okay.
But serpentine doesn't necessarily have a high amount of copper. It has high amounts of nickel, is kind of the thing that is
Okay.
signature of serpentine. But anyhow, yeah, that's the PNG film site geology breakdown. But given everything we've talked about like the iron oxides and the calcium carbonates and the quartz and all of that, I mean, all of that stuff is present there. And then there's also this like thrust zone, which again, going back to like mechanical stresses of an environment, like pushing and smushing and jamming things around, like that's present there. Sort of that intense effect of volcanoes being there is part of the landscape there too. So, I mean, it's quite a cocktail. I
Yeah.
mean, no wonder Bigfoot hangs out there or can be seen there.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Selenite caves in Chihuahua, in the Chihuahua Desert,
Yeah.
just out of a note of interest, you've heard of the zone of silence before, right? The
Is it the place where they don't have cell phones and they don't have.
Yeah,
No.
like if you're flying an airplane through that area,
You have
like
to
you're
fly
in
around
trouble.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, your instruments don't work.
Yeah, and
And
there's no towers there. There's no like cell phone towers there. There's no like, yeah. Isn't that in the United
yeah,
States? I thought that was in the
it's
United
in
States.
it's in Mex it's in
It's in
Mexico.
Mexico. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
I've
it's
heard
in
of it, but
northern Mexico.
I just didn't know. I guess it was in Mexico.
Speaking of like magnetite, they've been hit by so many meteorites. Like that area can almost draw like a meteorite from space. It definitely has drawn some of our missile launches
That's
from that
crazy.
have been done in White Sands, in the White Sands
Yeah.
testing
Yeah.
area.
Totally.
Yeah,
It's
it's drawn
drawing them
in.
in.
Yeah, it's supposedly drawn in UFOs too, draws in meteorites. So that whole entire place is weird. That's got to be just a like a super magnet hotspot.
That's interesting.
Um,
Selenite is gypsum, right? And gypsum is calcium sulfate. So there's a lot of calcium up in gypsum, and
okay,
there's a lot of sulfate, and then also some H2O, some water molecules.
yeah,
Gypsum's chemical whatever is like calcium sulfate and H2O, basically, is what
mhm.
gypsum is written as. That's really interesting to me. Sulfate and
These sil
sulfur popped up as a lot of, was popping up a lot in some of this calcium carbonate biogenic magnetite formation stuff because sulfur is used in the in anaerobic conditions. Sulfur can be used as like a as a an electron substitute for oxygen for the cellular respiration thing. So like sulfur's there with all of that too. So just as an aside.
okay,
Yeah. So I'm curious. I'd be curious to know. Maybe we should look up magnetic properties of gypsum or selenite. I'd be interested to know what
yeah,
research is out there regarding that. I'm going to write that down. That would be a great rabbit hole to get lost in.
yeah. You have to see these. You have to see these pictures of these selenite caves
Oh,
too.
I've
And
definitely
I think
seen
it's
the pictures
you've
and
seen the
they're
pictures.
underground.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. They're underground.
yeah.
And there was like an underground lake that they had to drain in order to get access to them. Do you know this?
Oh, that was all submerged.
Well, one area. I mean, I don't know if all of them. I knew an artist who was like one of my kids' friends' mom. She was fascinating, cool, interesting artist woman. And she got to go in those caves and take pictures. And what had happened was it was like a once in a lifetime opportunity, and she took it. And they basically had this, they found these giant selenite formations in this underground aquifer thing, and they moved all the water out of it so they could study the crystals down there. And she had an opportunity to go down there and look at them, and she did. And she said that there was like they had to wear like breathing devices, like oxygen like things, because there was
Yeah,
so much like methane and stuff down there.
yeah,
um
and it's they form in really hot pockets too. So I think you have to protect your skin and your
yeah. and
everything else too. Yeah.
and so they, I guess, somehow had removed the water so they could study them, and then they realized they were affecting them, and so they like reflooded it and like stopped studying. They went and they looked at it, they studied it, and then they like reflooded the area to just leave it be. And I don't know if this is the same cavern of selenite you're talking about.
It doesn't sound like it, but it sounds like something very similar.
It's
Yeah.
something very similar, yeah. Because
Yeah.
but I have seen the pictures of, and you want to know something else really freaking cool about geology and like selenite, and you know how it looks like all like angular and kind of tubular
Yeah.
on a macro level. Like you look at that with a scanning electron microscope and it looks the same on like a molecular level, like the structures of it. It's like iterated on a microscopic level and on a macro level, right? So cool that crystals look
Yeah,
the same in their little teeny tiny particles as they do in their like big physical way.
they do. Yeah, the subatomic structure is the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think, yeah, like,
It's a fucking
like,
fractal,
you,
man.
yeah, yeah, like you get a pyrite cube,
Uh huh.
and you look at the subatomic structure of the pyrite and the pyrite
And
cube,
it's
and it looks like
cubey.
cube.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
It's a bunch
cubey.
of little
Yeah,
cubes. Pyrite is another one that's
100%.
actually really cool because it is a sulfur based compound. Do you know that? That is also
No,
a sulfur based compound that is formed in anaerobic environments. And it can only happen when it's in this anaerobic sediment, is where that forms. So just
hmm,
saying. Pyrite is another one that's
sweet.
really, it's iron sulfate, right? So it's iron and sulfate. And yeah. Again, a lot of magic happens when you're in these like oxygen deprived situations and there are microorganisms using not oxygen to like do their thing, like live out their
Yeah.
little life cycles and stuff.
Going back to the place in the Chihuahuan Desert, though, the Nike Caves got discovered because they were doing, I think they were looking for silver
Mm-hmm.
originally in the area. And they ended up finding, what was it, silver, zinc, and lead. And then they found the selenite down further. And
So they were looking for
so,
something else and discovered the selenite.
and, and they discovered it. Yeah.
What were they looking
They're
for?
at silver
Silver.
primarily, but they,
Okay.
yeah, there's lead and zinc there too.
Oh, so that's fascinating too that there's that mixture of metals and
On top of it,
yeah.
again,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, and so
Huh.
there's a theory that this might be sending transmissions or sending out frequencies that are actually attracting UFOs in the area because it's a UFO hotspot.
Mhm.
All the locals there know it, and it's just
Mhm.
kind of common knowledge and not a big deal. I told you about the friend I have from Chihuahua.
Did you? And I don't remember
I
if you
know I
did.
told you about him one time. His name is Ramses. He's awesome. Anyway, I've worked with him a long time and he's into medicine ceremony and we've had a connection on that. So got to discussions about stuff. But last time he was in Chihuahua visiting, I started getting all this random information about this place. And I found out that there's a huge megalithic structure. I think it's got a couple of different names, but I think one of the names is like Casas Grande.
Big
Uh,
house. Wait, Casa Grande?
yeah, or big house. There's a group of indigenous people there called the Tarahumara who are super interesting. They're some of the fastest runners in the world, kind of like those people that live up in the Andes and can utilize oxygen better than other people can. They can run super fast. I thought that was really interesting. But anyways,
It's like the
the
Sherpa
Casas,
and the Himalayas or some stuff. Like
yeah, yeah,
they're adapted with the low oxygen. Anyways, yeah, go on.
yeah, Sierra Madre Mountains, right? They're running all over the Sierra Madre Mountains like
Mhm.
maniacs all the time, and they
Mhm.
have
Mhm.
legs like tree trunks. I thought that was super fascinating. But there's a story or a rumor going around that they can actually like chase down deer and things like that. Like they can chase down a deer to exhaustion,
Oh
which is
shit.
kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, that
I don't
is.
know if that's I don't know if that's true, but it's pretty amazing.
Maybe it
Just to
happened
think about
once
that.
and then it's like
Yeah,
no.
like
Yeah.
that was their best runner ever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right, right.
yeah.
But I mean,
Um,
even if that happened once, that's really cool. you know?
yeah, no doubt. So this Casas Grande place has these hinge-like megaliths, and I'm not sure exactly when it was built, and it's super interesting because it's almost kind of like Stonehenge meets Adobe. You know how that Adobe kind of structures just kind of look a little bit more rounded and stuff like
Yeah,
that?
totally. Yeah. Mhm.
So it's like a roundish. adobe-ish, almost looking Stonehenge sort of structure.
Okay.
And that place is known by the locals to attract UFOs and extraterrestrial beings. Like there's been actual like close encounters where they actually see beings like coming through the doorway and these pillars and
And and those
and
that
sometimes crap.
Adobe, what is that structure called again? The Adobe whatever.
Casas Grande, that's one of the names for it. I'm forgetting the native term for it. That's the Spanish term for it, but
Casas Grandes, town in Mexico. Okay, yeah, I just needed to look at it. I've seen this before. Yes, I've actually seen this before, but I wasn't sure what it
yeah,
was called. I needed to look at. I just had to Google it because I was like, wait a second. Sweet. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So apparently,
Wasn't this like
people see.
it wasn't they were like what was this used for, and they people were like maybe people lived here, but the way it was like structured, they're like no, this is not where people were living. Like
Yeah,
there were
yeah. There's
reasons why people like were not living here, and it was for something else, and nobody could really figure out
right,
what it was for. Is this
right. It's like
resonating with
yeah,
you? Okay.
absolutely, and
Okay.
that to me is kind of pretty common for like the Henge kind of places, like Gobekli Tepe and Stonehenge. It's
Yeah, I was
like
like,
no, like nobody was living there. It was an astronomical observatory. Partially, it was probably
yeah.
it could have been some kind of university where people came in to take classes and go back home. Nobody lived there, but it was definitely an observatory.
Yeah. Huh.
There was no way around that. Yeah, because the
Were
mathematics
there
involved.
like wells or like water canals in this thing? There's just these like grooves, like rocked grooves in the ground here anyways.
Oh,
Huh.
not that I remembered from when I was looking at it, but that's cool. I didn't see that before.
Huh.
Yeah, so legends go that it,
Fascinating.
like it, alien beings will just walk straight through these hinge openings like a gateway and come right through. And sometimes UFOs will be seen overhead a lot in that area.
Yeah.
But the thing that my friend Ramses told me was that peyote grows everywhere, all over the place around there.
Really?
Yeah, and he says that the indigenous people said that the aliens put it there so that they could talk to the aliens.
Yeah. Okay. Huh.
So
Again,
sounds like super woo, but to me, with everything else that's going on with those kinds of things,
the fact that there's plant medicine there is like it's kind
to
of like
top it
some
off,
weird cherry on top of a whole bunch of stuff, you know?
yeah. And
Yeah.
that's not the first time I've ran across stuff like that either. Like
Yeah.
in Egypt they have like the Blue Lotus that has like DMT in it,
Mm-hmm.
and in a lot of other places I've seen like little pictographs of like little mushroom drawings in the area and stuff like that too.
Fascinating.
So the plants connect into it too, I think.
I mean, the
Like you were
plants,
saying, or kind of,
yeah, it's like then there's the plant piece of it, you know, like
yeah.
part of the situation is not just, yeah, the plants, the bacteria, the mineral material, the presence of water, you know, moving water being a part of a lot of this stuff is like an interesting component too, you know, it's like water is you know is what it's a conductor, it can conduct electricity, right? Water contains a lot of these little magnetotactic bacteria, right? So some of those like organisms that are actually creating magnetic signatures. The movement of
Hmm.
water does interesting things which I can't explain because I don't know enough about it, but there's some sort of like hydrogen, like ionization that happens around moving water,
Sure.
which, you know, there's sort of a magnetic field that's produced from that. It's a it's not like a super magnetic field, but it is a magnetic field. Yeah, it's just interesting. And then how does that engage with the plants and biology, the biota that's there, and then the minerals and rocks, and then also just like then the climate and the changes that are happening around. I don't know. It's all so fascinating. The power of place, man. Yeah. That's why we need folklore and mythology and like storytelling, because science can't wrap itself around that for a narrative. That's why we need stories. That's why we need people telling us that the star people left the peyote plants. Because, like, there'd be no other way to put that together
Yeah.
if it wasn't for the knowledge that came through in folklore, basically. I don't know what else to call it. Indigenous knowledge, all of it, you know?
Yeah.
That trips me out. It's cool that the peyote is there as well. Huh.
Yeah, I thought that was super interesting because it just reminded me of that like Blue Lotus stuff in Egypt that you see sometimes in some of their stelas or whatever you call it.
Yeah. Or like in the Four
They're
Corners areas, there's the datura and what gypsum weed, you know, all the Carlos Castaneda things, right? All the herbs that were in those
yeah,
books. And then also, I mean, all the different medicine plants, the San Pedros, the Bergmansias, the belladonna, trumpet flower, you know, ayahuasca vine. Wonder what kind of soil all that grows in. Oh, you know what kind of soil that
right.
probably grows in? So, like, ayahuasca probably grows in the rainforest, right? So, you're talking about highly leached, what we call in soil science oxasols, right? Which are like these tropical soils that are highly leached with a ton of so many things have been stripped away. But one of the things that is sort of key to that is iron oxides.
Okay.
You know, again, everything else gets weathered and sort of stripped out by all of the rain. And then the iron is oxidized and becomes red, 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 red,
Huh.
red.
Yeah.
So, and I'm curious, like, what's going on with these desert soils, too. These desert soils, you know, usually
Yeah.
accumulate carbonates. That's like a key thing because there's not any rain in the desert. So carbonates usually accumulate in the surface layers of those soils. So
Yeah.
there we go again with the carbonate shit, which is the same stuff that's in limestone.
Since we're talking about power of place and you're in California, could talk about Shasta for a little bit too.
Whoo, Shasta! Taking a journey
Yeah.
to Lemuria. Boom. Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
we're going there in about a month from now. We're going to take our annual
Okay.
trip to the Shasta.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so once again you got one of those mountain areas that's like always seems to be a UFO hotspot. That's a pretty big UFO hotspot, I would say, Shasta.
Big old volcano. That's what that
Yeah,
sucker is.
here we are back to volcanoes again, yeah.
Yep.
And big ass lava tubes everywhere too, yeah.
Underground, there are lava tubes there. Yes, they have documented them. Yep.
Yeah, like not just small ones, like ones that you could actually walk through or drive through if
Yes.
you wanted to. Yeah,
Yes. And you can enter
yeah.
the center of the hollow earth there, apparently.
So,
So
so
they
they say,
say.
yeah, yeah.
I think it's the lava tubes that get you there, man.
Okay, so part of the Shasta story is this legend of J.C. Brown, the guy that was a prospector that went in there and found tunnels and found these like dead giants dressed in like copper armor or something weird like that. But he was actually looking for veins of stuff, I think,
Mm-hmm.
to go in there.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like the Hearst family used to, like during
Okay.
the end of the 1800s. They were like trying to prospect everywhere, find out where all the rich veins are.
Yeah. So Shasta's part of the Cascades, the mountain range.
Yeah.
It's sort of like the wee little southern end of the Cascades is like where I'm at, right? And the Cascades go all the way up through Oregon and Washington, ironically, in a lot of Bigfoot territory,
Yeah.
cryptid territory in general. If I'm not mistaken, same like Mount St. Helens, um, all of that is part of the Cascades. Yeah. Lassen.
Hmm.
Lassen's another volcano that's not far from Shasta. And then also, sort of like the western edge of the Cascades, I think, is like over on the Klamath where Bluff Creek is. Like, all that is considered, like I said, the wee southern end of the Cascade. And then it goes all the way up north to Washington. So, just to kind of give you like a bigger picture of the volcanic range that is the Cascades.
Yeah.
And then, like, you can also think about how much activity there is out here in that area. It's also super heavily forested and not very populated compared to a lot of areas in the United States. So, but
Oh, that's right. That's right. I remember hearing some Native American folklore about Shasta. I can't remember which tribe it is that's native. It's Yurok or something like that, maybe?
Karuk, maybe?
Something like that. Anyway, they're always kind of told like not to go above the tree line by Shasta because it definitely cuts off and there's like no more trees
And they were told
after a
not to
certain.
go up to the where the tree line stops. But you can
Yeah, they're
definitely
like
visibly see where the trees end. Like, it's a line
yeah,
for sure.
yeah, they're always told not to go past the tree line as kids. It's like
Um,
you step over like that one threshold and then it's like all of a sudden you're in a totally different
yeah.
zone. Yeah, right.
Okay, so there were several tribes kind of in that area. So there's like the Hoopa, the Yurok, the Karuk, all kind of in that area.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. There were a lot of indigenous people here. There were many, many, many tribes here. So I'm
Yeah.
sure that is not an exhaustive list. I think that's interesting, though, that, there's certain areas like Panther Meadow where like the spring water is sacred. And the
Hmm.
indigenous people there basically just got, it was several years back now, but like all these like weird new agers would like go there and like bottle the spring water from Panther Meadow and like be like, it's healing powers of blah blah blah, because new age white people are totally fucked in the head sometimes. And they
Oh
closed
yeah.
it. They closed the meadow, so you can't go there anymore and steal the water, basically. So huzzah
Yeah,
for
because the
that shit,
tourists kind of
because people don't know how to
ruined
act
that.
right. Yeah, but that was, so there's also, I guess, there are stories about the water being, having like these sort of mystical healing properties because it's such a powerful place. There's
Yeah.
also a waterfall area that's like not too far. It's called like, what do they call it now? I don't know the indigenous name for it, but I think it's called McLeod Falls. And I went hiking there when the kid was just a little babe, and I had him on my back, and me and Annabelle walked up to the waterfall. And that place was like, that place was really interesting because it was like fairy folk land. Like,
Hmm.
that, like, it had this very distinct signature of like fae. And there's a lot of stories about that place as well. Fae stories. So, anyhow, that place in general is like Shasta, and like the surrounding areas are like, it's very, there's a lot of stories and mythology around sort of like the magic of it. And then there's like the Lemurian thing with like Saint Germain, like the Lemurians live in the
Yeah.
mountain and whatever.
That all came from like Guy Ballard and the guy who started the I Am Church or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah,
Guy
and then they
Ballard.
sort of like
Yeah.
adapted the Saint Germain mythology to their whole thing, and like it's
Right.
actually problematic. Problematic stuff. with weavings of white supremacy. And, a lot of the UFO stuff has that. That's the kind of fucking shit you run into in Shasta. A
That's the
lot
kind
of
of shit you
Saint,
run into in
a
Shasta.
lot of Saint Germain shit. A lot of like crystal skull stuff is there. Like I steward this crystal skull, so like come sit with the crystal skull or like pay money to come see the crystal skull. So Shasta's interesting. We always, we don't stay in the city of Shasta. We stay out. We go camping or whatever. But there's always one day that we go to there's like this like new age bookstore there called Soul Connections, and they've got like crystals and jewelry and tarot cards, and they have a whole section where they just sell gongs. So it's just gongs in this one, and
Nice.
they let you play the gongs and the crystal singing bowls and stuff like that. It's a very big store. And so my kid really loves Soul Connections. So we always take an adventure to go to Soul Connections, and we people watch, and we get a little something from Soul Connections. I got Annabelle a copper coin with Saint Germain's face on it and Shasta on the. It's like a little coin. It's got Shasta on one side of it and then Saint Germain on the other. So
Nice.
I bought him that because it was a little tongue in cheek. So I bought him the copper Saint Germain coin. He's like, I love this thing.
That's funny. It fits into the tales of Saint Germain, like paying for things with gold in town all the time, gold
Totally,
coins.
totally.
Yeah.
A friend of ours came camping with us, like one of the first years we went, and she's like, "What is the deal with what do you like? What is the deal with like Saint Germain and like what is the deal?" So I started going off about like the Lemurians and the Hollow Earth and Saint Germain and all this stuff, and like my husband was just like, where did this come from? Like, how do you know all this? Like, I didn't know you knew all this stuff about Shasta. And I was just like, oh, yeah, babe, it's like this. He's just like, some weird stuff, lady. I was like, sorry, yeah, well, I'm fascinated by it. All the
Yeah.
cuckoo people, all the like possibilities of, Shasta's a very powerful place. There's no doubt about it. It's a very sacred and powerful place.
I think I heard something about some kind of Native American legend about like a star person living inside the mountain, like coming here and making a home for himself inside of the mountain.
I think there might even be like a we all lived under the earth and came out of there story, just like there is in the
Four
Black
Corners.
Hills. And the Black Hills. Do you know the Black Hills where the
Oh, the
Lakota
Black
people are?
Hills too.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've got
Yeah.
not a creation mythology, but they were just like, look, we all went underground for a while and we lived in the Black Hills, and then there was a time when we were able to emerge in this new time and new age and stuff. And so yeah, cuz like
Yeah.
the Hopi, the Anastasi, right? They have something like that in the Four
Yeah.
Corners
Yeah.
area, and then I think
Yeah.
the native people in the Shasta area also had something like that. But yeah, and then also Black Hills area, and I don't even know how many other tribes had,
Similar
story,
to that.
history passed down like with information like that. Yeah, there's a lot of like we lived underground for a long time and then we came up above ground again.
Yeah.
The ant people.
No, yeah, yeah, that's it took, yeah, the Hopi took refuge with the ant people in
Those
the
were the
Four
star
Corners.
people, right? And so then there's a very
Yeah.
similar story in Shasta where there's these star people that lived
Hmm.
underground and they help
And
anyway,
it
so
helped them too. Oh, that's so cool.
yeah. I could be talking out of the side of my neck and conflating different stories, but I think that if I remember that is the case. I find that stuff very interesting. All that story, history, or folklore. I don't know. Would you call that folklore? Do you call indigenous oral history and creation mythology or origin mythology? I don't know what you would call that, but I think
I
it's
don't
really
know.
interesting that all those like there's so much correlation, like so much overlapping similar details.
Yeah. I think mythology is always like a tricky word because like
Right.
you were saying, like these are tales of their oral history, and
Yeah. Because
I think
it's
a
for
lot of
them, it's
them
their history. It's like literally their
exactly.
historical records of where they came from and how they came to be, and then calling it folklore or something seems to
It
um
seems like a death. It seems like a
diminishing.
death. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Same with mythology. Folklore and mythology just don't seem to quite be the right descriptor for that when you're talking about ancient people's historical records.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I hope that was interesting. I found out some interesting things. Thanks for sharing stuff about all those places. I found that to be compelling, when looking at it through the lens of landscape and all the different pieces of the landscapes that are there.
There was also like initiatory kind of stuff and like acoustical stuff too that I think is interesting. Like
Yeah.
there's a initiatory basalt cave in Scotland.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Cool.
yeah, it's just creepy how like perfectly designed this cave is. So it's
How did basalt even get there? I guess the ocean floor. Okay.
Scotland has these like entire islands made of basalt
Well, that
pillars.
makes sense because it's ocean floor.
Yeah,
Basalt is big on the ocean floor. And then it pushes
yeah,
up and makes islands. Okay. All right. Interesting.
yeah. There's all kinds of crazy geology in Scotland. Yeah, I was more interested in this like basalt cave that apparently like initiates. They had druids and possibly even Essenes that were hanging out up there in Scotland, and I think it
Oh.
was one of their spots. Right around the spring equinox, you go into one end of the cave. It's something I think it's like 18.6 kilometers long or something like that. Anyways, the number 18.6, the number has to do with like the cycles of the moon cycle.
Okay.
But you're immersed in this whole cave in the dark with basalt that has magnetic properties, and you have to
Yeah.
do this journey from one end to the other underneath the ground on the spring equinox, and you're supposed to be able to see Venus come up on the spring equinox as soon as you get out of the other end of the cave.
Shit, you
But
better
this
walk at
one
the
part,
right speed.
but yeah, you have to like walk at the right speed or get there early and late or something.
Huh.
And I did hear another
Fascinating.
person say that sometimes there would be cave initiations like that where you'd be inside of a cave for like 3 days and be let outside when the sun rises in the morning and have like your blindfold or your hood yanked off. So it's like you get pure sunlight like right in your eyes.
Oh.
And it's supposed to fuck with your pineal gland
I was just
and
gonna
give
say it
you
does something to your yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, it fucks with your pineal gland and gives you like a quick DMT dose.
Oh, that's so interesting. Oh, wow.
Yeah, these motherfuckers are figuring shit like that out. Like, I don't know. I think that's like super interesting.
I think
And
that's very interesting. I want to go to that cave. I want a little kick in the pants in my pineal gland.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, there's
Isn't
some
that funny? So, like, how we were talking about how, like, okay, there's like peyote all around the Adobe Casas Grande place or like whatever. And then, like, there's this initiation journey and sort of like using the sun in that same way, right? To like initiate a little like response in your brain that's probably going to produce DMT or some little hit, like that.
yeah,
I mean, yeah, altered states, man.
yeah, because
Produced
your
altered
brain
states are part of like a lot of this stuff, you know?
yeah, like the magnetic properties of all that rock around you's got to affect you. like when you're making that
Definitely.
journey.
Yeah. Like,
I can only imagine.
like the
So
God helmet, only like the cave version. Like,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Wow.
I think a lot of these places have different things like that. Like a lot of the Egyptian places have like acoustical things that can alter your consciousness inside. The
Yeah,
Hopi
frequency,
Kivas,
man. Right? Frequency and
yeah,
vibration and how what is that doing, Like our brains, I don't know what hertz our brains and bodies resonate at, but that's something that yeah,
yeah, it's like consciousness technology. So
consciousness technology. That's a good way
yeah,
of putting it. We should explore frequency kind of as its own thing cuz like the acoustic thing and all of that is so that's its own ball of wax for
ooh,
sure.
here's okay. I just had one more juicy nugget and I'll
Okay,
stop.
please,
It's
please give me nuggets.
it's on a different note. So I was looking at like that Bradshaw Ranch stuff, and then I just got on this like kick. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll just do the Weird Ranch, the Weird Ranch roundup, and I started like watching more like Skinwalker Ranch stuff and Frog Ranch stuff,
Yeah,
and Blind Frog Ranch and Skinwalker always coincide because they're really close together, right?
yeah,
And they're throwing so much goddamn money into scientific investigation. Like it's just it's fun to watch, even though I don't understand all of it. But I'm pretty sure without knowing, Blind Frog Ranch and Skinwalker Ranch both brought in different scientists to measure energy in their certain power spots. Both of them have spots that are particularly really, really, really dense with energy
uh huh.
that super weird shit happens at. Forget the name of the instrument. I'll have to go back in and rewatch that again. But they detected the makeup of black holes in both areas,
Hmm.
like energy that only comes from black holes
Oh, interesting.
is is coming from both areas in both of their power spots.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, that's a serious like what the fuck.
That is a what the fuck. And dark
Yeah,
matter, like black holes and dark matter, are really, really super fascinating.
yeah,
Wow. It's like the
yeah.
same signatures as black holes. Hmm.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
lost my shit when I found that out. I wasn't even trying to do it. It's just like I watched one show with Skinwalker and I was like, "Are you serious?" And then I was just like done with that. And I was like, "I gotta watch some Blind Frog Ranch." And like, yeah, I got a black hole over here.
Oh,
Or a
shit.
black hole looking thing over here. I was like, "No fucking way."
That's so cool. That's weird. Funny how you just were watching and the information popped up twice. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Combing through it all. All right. Well, I think we should let's sign off this recording. And
Okay.
yeah. Well, thanks for Power of Place, dude. That was good. And
Yeah, no, thank you, Joe.
all
Stay
right.
weird, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, stay weird.
Bye. Stay weird.
Bye.
Bye.